Good morning. My name is Beth Richardson. I'm an area forester for Cooperative Extension, and behind the camera is Mr. Guy Sabin with the South Carolina Forestry Association, and I want to thank him for inviting me to talk about logging as a first step to reforestation, especially on this hot August day, right smack in the middle of diamondback mating season. There's a lot of things on the logger's plate, and we're going to put one more on it. And that is, I want loggers to start looking at themselves as the first step to reforestation. How you log a piece of property matters. You want to keep your stumps low, and that facilitates chemical site preparation with ground equipment like a skidder. For example, if you leave stumps up kind of high, that skidder is going to have a wobble. When it does, that spray is going to go and the arc is not going to hit its target. And a lot of times I see that in the woods when they're out doing chemical site prep. Also, you need to work with the landowners to decide if they're going to reforest their property. And know that scattering your debris rather than piling it may facilitate planting, because you won't have spots, big huge spots of debris where you cannot get the seedlings in the ground. Also, on your very poor soils, it's very, very noticeable that your trees that you reforested with in the logging sites are much greener than the ones that are out in the desert without the logging debris. When you do a clear cut, it's called a clear cut. Everything should be on the ground, and this also facilitates reforestation. Little trees like this one in my hand, the herbicide cannot get on the leaf surface. We do have soil active herbicides that may kill this. Some species are harder to kill than others in hardwoods, such as holly. So it's important to have everything on the ground. But what's even more important is making sure that all of your pines are on the ground regardless of how small they are, because none of our forest herbicides have a soil activity that will kill them. And if we can't get the spray on the foliage, and even if we can, we have a good chance of not killing it. And then we have to go with an aerial. An aerial site prep is more expensive than ground application. So that will help the landowner to not pay as much for site preparation. This is a clear cut where there was great communications between the landowner and the logging company. Everything's been clear cut, and trust me, these hardwoods were not worth 2 cents. The only one was worth anything was a Carolina basswood just for viewing. Other than that, they were all scrappy. And behind you, you see piles. Well, before I was talking about scattering your debris. But the landowner wants to put a pasture here. So scattering the debris would not have facilitated putting cows here. So he's converting this to a pasture. He's got the piles he plans to burn at some point, and all the piles have very small bolts. Everything that could be merchandised was merchandised and put on the trucks. And so this makes it a very good, clean, clear cut. Everything down. Howdy again. One of the things that I want loggers to pay attention to is what we call non-native invasive species, which means they're not native to this part of the country or to this state. And most of them have come from other countries. They have no natural enemies, and they take over our natural fauna. This is kind of funny here, because I just taught a class in this area, and this bicolor lespedeza was not out here as of yet. And so just a little time, it's growing, it's spreading, and there was a lot more Japanese climbing fern, and we'll show you some better examples later, but I do believe that the bicolor is beginning to shade out the climbing fern unless it can start climbing fast enough. And this burns with a real high BTUs. It can kill your timber if a fire gets set in it when it starts climbing your trees. It will climb to the top of them. Florida's full of it. And behind me, this dark green tree. It looks so innocent. Well, there's a tree called a Bradford pear, and it's on a rootstock. and that tree's quick to break down. And when it breaks down, it starts sprouting from the rootstock, and that rootstock is a calorie pair. And we're going to show you why it can be dangerous to your equipment in just a second. This is one of the thorns on this calorie pair. And you can see how long it is. As sharp as a tack. It can go through tires. In certain parts of the state, especially the upstate, these have spread really all over the place. And loggers do not like to go log on properties that's full of calorie pair because of these thorns getting into their tires and their equipment. So it can make a forest land worthless, and it's important to know what you're logging in. I've eaten so many spider webs today, I'm not even hungry anymore. This tree beside me is called a paulownia. It's very invasive. The leaves, when they start to grow, they're very huge. As the tree gets larger, the leaves are more like this size here. We do not know where this seeded in. We're in the middle of maybe 400 or 500 acres of timber. And we don't know how this tree got seeded in here except maybe by birds. The landowner killed the beginning ones that we first spotted for him about 2 months ago. But these are coming off with the rootstock or by seed. I believe this is far enough away to be by seed. Then above us, of course, is a China berry. Anytime you're in the woods logging and you see trees that you haven't, or brush, or bushes, or vines you've never seen before, it's important to find out what they are and let the landowner know. If you don't know, call up the Forestry Commission or your local extension office in that county and have them come out or bring a good sample. And when I say a sample, when you're going to bring a sample to somebody, bring a sample, not a piece of leaf. Bring the whole thing. All right, that makes it easier for us to identify. Right beside me is one of the biggies. It is federally against the law to take any part of this plant off-site. This is called tropical soda apple. And I don't know why it doesn't look like a soda or an apple. But those seeds, these pods, they look like miniature watermelons. And each one of them have 50,000 viable seeds. And what happens, this is eye candy for deer. So a deer will eat these, and then they'll go to a place in bedding and go to the bathroom and just spread it and spread it and spread it. Now I'm wearing these gloves on purpose and briar breeches because these have huge briars, as you can see, coming from on top of the leaf and underneath. It makes a horse nettle look tame. The seed pods look very close to horse nettle, and as they ripen, they'll turn yellow. But what we're finding here in South Carolina is they're acclimating to our weather, and they're staying greener longer, and the seed pods are staying on if they're not eaten by the deer as late as May and June of the following year. So this makes it more spreadable. Anytime you see something like this on the property, you should contact the Forestry Commission or the Clemson Extension. The landowner is not in trouble. You're not in trouble. In fact, the loggers are the heroes for finding these things and letting people know. And it's important to facilitate reforestation that landowners know where the problems are on their property, because a lot of landowners do not walk and go over the property like a logger will. So y'all are the first step. I'm standing next to a bunch of tropical soda apple plants that have been spread by deer. Once this species gets started and the eye candy they can't resist, it spreads all over the property. And that's why there's certain invasive species, it's important for the logger to recognize them and know that he needs to wash his equipment before he leaves the site. The Japanese climbing fern has spores, it's spread in air, gets on your equipment. If you're in Kogan grass and it's blooming, that's one that's widely spread. Certain states are having a horrible time with that particular invasive species. So when you start seeing invasive species, I know it's extra time on your part, extra cost, but it's important not to spread these to other people's properties. I have finally changed to another cigar, so if you've been paying attention, you've noticed that. In front of me, behind me, all around me is the Japanese climbing fern, and it's beginning to climb. When the landowner had a clear cut adjacent from this, he did not know about this patch. He knew about the other one, and it's dead. The forest herbicides got it. And it's important for him to have known this patch was here. Behind me is a clear cut, and the landowner, if you can see the tops of the little loblollies, has reforested, and the Japanese climbing fern, the spores have found its way back to the clear cut area. So it will be spreading, and it will grow on top of the seedlings and keep spreading unless he has a herbicide treatment to control it. But if he had known about the patch to begin with, he would not have this problem. So it's very important that if y'all recognize a problem, let the landowner, the forester, or someone know. Growing beautiful timber like this is wonderful, and the loggers love to see it. Reforestation is the #1 start to this, so remember, you're the beginning of reforestation so we can grow more timber that's beautiful like the timber behind me.